Welcome along, everyone. This time out, we're not actually going to be speaking about mathematics very much, but we are going to be speaking about R. And specifically, we're going to be talking about how to use R efficiently. As you may be aware, R is an incredibly powerful tool for creating custom visualizations, but it can be sometimes a little bit onerous to create repeated visualizations. So what I'm going to show you in this video is a pretty simple and straightforward way of creating visualizations, box plots, histograms, or whatever you'd like of all of the numeric columns or variables in a data frame. In other words, all of the variables that it makes sense to create a box plot of, or a histogram, or anything else like that. So hopefully you'll join me. And the first thing you'll need to do is to open up R and make sure that you've got it ready to go. So I'm just going to create a quick little program here, and we are just going to call it, let's say, demo of looping through numeric, numeric what? Variables to create, I can't spell visuals today clearly, create visuals. Now to do this, we are going to be using the iris function. Iris is a built-in data set within R, which has information about irises, the flowers, the length and width of their petals, and so on and so forth. I'm just going to make a copy of this data set. We'll call it IR, and the data iris, that first line that I put in, this one here, just called it into memory. And you may have noticed as I was typing this in, there was a bit of a pop-up. And this gives information about this particular popular data set. Now, let's just have a look at the overall structure of this data frame. Go ahead and we'll run those. And so what we see is that there's 150 observations. We have sepal length, sepal width, petal length, and petal width, and we also have species. So 5 variables, 150 observations. 4 of those variables are numeric, and one of them is factors and wouldn't be suitable for making numeric visualizations. Now, hopefully by now, or hopefully you may be aware, that if we wanted to say make a box plot of any one of those, we could do that. Let's do sepal length. And we'll just say horizontal is true because we want a horizontal box plot. So if I wanted to make box plots, and there we see we've got the box plot there, I could add a title for it and so on. If I wanted to do box plots for all of those numeric variables, I could easily just replicate this and do it for each individual variable. But that can be somewhat tedious, and the fun part of this isn't actually coding and making the graphs. The fun part is looking at this and seeing if we can derive any sort of insight from what we're doing. So instead, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a loop, and we're going to loop through all of the variables that we're looking at, or loop through all of the columns and create box plots for all the variables that are appropriate. Now, before I do that, and in fact, before I do any sequence of plots, I like to change the size of the plots or how many come out there. So you'll notice here over on the right-hand side, under the plots, there's just one plot that I've created, but I actually like to have multiple plots in there because I think I can fit more in. And so I'm just going to change that, and I'm going to use this code, which is essentially Now, instead of just having one great big plot, I'm going to have a matrix or a lattice of 2 by 2. Then after I've done all that, I'm going to send it back. So if I go ahead and run this, what you'll see, I've got one plot. If I run it again, I've done a few things wrong there. Let me try that again. There we go. There's the first one. There's the second one, third one, and fourth one. So all I've done here is just given, instead of getting one great big plot, I'm putting in 4 smaller plots. Then let me look at a number of them relatively quickly. So this bit of code right here is the one that makes it 2 by 2, sort of partitions it out. And this just breaks it back to 1 by 1. And I needn't have it 1 by 1 or 2 by 2. I could have it 2 by 3 or 3 by 2, whatever my particular preference is for the screen that I'm working on. Before I go back to that, or before we go back to that, um, before we go back to 1, let's start looping through everything. So to do a loop in R is pretty straightforward. It's very similar to a lot of other languages. So we're going to do for I, and then we use the command in 1, 2, and in this case, I'm going to say the number of columns of my data set. So ncol will count up the number of columns in this data set. In this case, we know it's going to be 5. And in fact, if I do that down here, we'll see that 5 columns. So this will loop through from 1 all the way up to 5. And then anything within the curly brackets is something that we're going to do. So within that, we're going to put our box plot right in there like that. Now, of course, we can't specify, or we don't want to write in, we want to loop through each of these. So instead of actually writing in what the name is or what the variable is, instead we're just going to do IR, which is our data frame, underscore I, and that will do the very first element. Horizontal equals true. And let's change the marker to number 10. So this will loop through all of them. Let's just go ahead and run this and see what happens. So it ran through the first 3 or 4, but it also did it for the factor variable, which, as you can see, is not very helpful at all. So we don't want that. We also notice that it doesn't give any titles. So when I'm looking at these plots, I don't know what I'm actually looking at. Am I looking at petal length or width or anything else? So let's add a title. The main command, as you may know, always gives us the title. I'm going to specify the names. The names gives the title of the columns in R. So if I type names, that's going to give me the title of the variables or the columns in this particular data frame, in this case, IR. So if I go down here and type in IR, it gives me all 5 of the names of them. But I don't want all 5 of the names. I just want the one that goes with the chart that I made. So that will give me the name of that particular chart. So now if I go ahead and run it, you see I've got sepal length, sepal width, petal length, petal width, as well as species. Now, it does bother me that I've got something in there, in this case species, that doesn't really warrant a box plot. And in fact, if this were a character variable, it would give me an error. So I'm actually going to put a conditional within my loop. And it's just a pretty straightforward conditional if is numeric, IR, and I'm just going to use the square brackets. And the square brackets just identify an element of the data frame, and in this case, I'm looking at that particular column. If that's true, in other words, if this is a numeric column, then do whatever inside those curly brackets. And in this case, it's creating a box plot. So let's go ahead and do that. And you see now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 for each of the 4 numeric columns. Remember, there were only the 4 numeric columns, and it doesn't give me one for the factor column. I could also do this for histograms. So let me just go ahead. I'm actually going to cut and paste and just change what I need to. So my loop is going to be the same. My isNumeric specification is going to be the same. The only thing that will change is a few little things. There's my histogram, because I want a histogram, and I want just I. I want the name. Horizontal doesn't make any sense at all. And I want to suppress the X label. So if I run this, let's go ahead and run it, and you'll see what it shows. If I run this, you'll notice it has down here under the X label a label that isn't very interesting. In fact, it's kind of dumb. So I'm just going to specify that my X label should be nothing. So let me go ahead and do that. X label equals, and now this should suppress that X label. And there we have it. So now that's just a little bit of code that lets us loop through and do just as many box plots as we like, only the numeric columns. Here's another one that lets us go through and look at only the numeric columns, and in this case, we're doing histogram. Another kind of plot that I like to do often, as do many, is a density plot. So let's just go ahead, and you can see that this can easily be adapted for almost any sort of visualization that you want. So in this case, I want to do a plot, and I want to plot the density of IR, and I should spell density correctly. That should give me the density. But I also like to put another useful variable or a function under there, which is rug, which shows me the actual data observations. And let's just call it color equals 4. I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to make it blue. I'm not even sure that that will work, actually. I'm not sure what blue 9 is. No, I don't like that. So let's just call it color equals 4. And there we have it. Density plots. So let's run the whole thing from the start. And we see we have box plots, we have histograms, and we have density plots. Now, observant watchers should be able to notice that it would be easy enough to just change this if I wanted to do different sorts of charts. If I wanted to, say, restrict myself to just doing factor variables, I could just as easily have, instead of isNumeric, have isFactor and only look at factor variables. And maybe I'd create a table and summarize them all, or something of that nature. The general principle, though, of looping through and creating many charts very, very quickly is one that hopefully you will find very, very helpful. I know I've found it helpful, and so that's what made me want to share it with all of you. Thanks very much for watching. Hope this has been helpful. I'd invite you to uh, click subscribe if you want to be notified of any updating videos. I don't update it frequently, but hopefully when something is updated, you will find it useful. Thanks again for watching. Have a wonderful day.